Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. The band toe, which I have here in my hand, is related to the wedge toe in terms of where the decreases are placed on the side of the sock. What's different about it is that those decreases are worked all the way up to the top, and then the 4 stitches on one side are joined to the 4 stitches on the other side to create the sort of continuous band at the top. There is an option to not graft this, so if you don't like grafting and that turns you off, you can finish this toe a little bit differently without the graft. The main thing is that the band is continuing all the way up to the top of the foot. There are lots of different ways you can shape this sock toe. The one I'll be demonstrating today creates a fairly broad and round toe, but I will mention at the end how you can adjust that shaping rate to get something that's more in line with how your foot is shaped. I'm simulating that this side of the work, this half of the work, is the sole of the foot, and you will know it on your own sock because there will be a heel right here. And then this half is the instep. The decreases are worked exactly the same way that they are for a wedge toe. It's just that the decrease rate is different and the starting position may be different depending on how you generally knit socks. I have this round of blue stitches on the needle. This is where I'm starting the toe. So as these stitches come off, we'll see the decrease in this first row of blue stitches. We start at the center of the toe. That's the beginning of the round. We're going to work until we get to 3 stitches before the end of the sole, and then we will work our first decrease. Okay, we have 3 stitches remaining and we want to work a decrease. The way these decreases are worked is that you are mirroring them on each half of the round. So we want the decreases to lean toward the center. This is the area that's changing in size. We want them to lean toward there. So we want a right leaning decrease over here and a left leaning decrease over here. A right leaning decrease is a knit 2 together. And then you work the last stitch. So now we are turning to the instep half of the round, and we're going to work our decreases the same over here, where we have this one over here is pointing to the left and the one at this end is pointed to the right. That means we need to do either an SSK decrease or you could do an SKP decrease. They both give you the same result. So I'm going to do an SSK. So, well, first I'm going to knit a stitch and then I'm going to do my decrease. So slip 2 stitches, one at a time as if to knit. Insert your left needle through the fronts of them so that your working needle is through the backs, and then work them together. We're going to work all the way across the instep stitches until we have 3 stitches remaining, and we will do our right leaning decrease, the knit 2 together. Our working needle is pointing to the right. That's how we know we're going to have a right leaning decrease. And then we work the last stitch. Now we're back at the instep and we have to do the decrease over here. So once again, I'm going to work the first stitch and then do the SSK, slip 2 stitches, one at a time as if to knit, insert the left needle through the front. And you'll see the working needle is pointed to the left. That tells us this will be a left leaning decrease. And you can see that in the result. Now that we've established our first decrease round, we're going to be working in a specific pattern of decrease rates. So I'm working with fingering weight yarn, 8 stitches per inch with 64 stitches. This is pretty standard sock gauge and stitch count numbers, but they can vary depending on the person's foot size or also the thickness of your yarn. So what I'm going to be demonstrating today works really well for adult size socks using fingering weight yarn in the stitch count range of about 56 stitches to say 72 or more stitches. There are some charts that help you understand the decrease rates for other stitch counts and different thicknesses of yarn, which I will leave down below. The decrease rate is worked every fourth round 1 time, every third round 2 times, every second round 3 times, and then you work every round until you are down to 8 stitches. So because this sock has kind of a tricky decrease rate, it changes. There are a couple of ways you can keep track of when it's time to work a decrease round. One is to give yourself a little tally sheet so that you know, you remember what the rate is. Like I have 4 rounds 1 time, so after the initial round, I had to do another one after 4 rounds, and then I have to do every 3 rounds 2 times, so round 8, round 11, and then I have to do every 2 rounds 3 times, so round 13, 15, and 17. And then after that, I do it every round until I have 8 stitches left. So this tells you what the rate is, and you can mark them off as you do them. But you also have to keep track in your fabric. You have to keep track of where you are. So you could place a marker on every round that is a decrease round, and that will help you remember. If it helps you, if you have enough colors of them, you could use a different color for each decrease rate. So I could use, say, gold for the first one and round 5, where I was supposed to do it every fourth round. And then I could use a different color like yellow for every 3rd round and red for every 2 rounds, just to help me keep track of how many more rounds do I need to do at this particular rate. At this point, I've done the 4, 3, 2 decreases. I've got my first decrease round here that establishes the toe. I've done 1 decrease every 4th round. And then with the 2 red markers, I've done 2 decreases every 3rd round. And then I've done 3 decreases every 2nd round. So now I'm ready to just work decreases every round, and I'm going to do that until I have 8 stitches remaining. So I have 1 more round of decreases to do before it's time to finish off the toe. What you'll notice is I have 1 stitch, I have a decrease, I have the 2nd decrease, and then I have 1 last stitch. So I have only 4 stitches left here. And now I have to do my final decrease. Remember, we started in the middle of the sole, so we're going to end in the middle of the sole right here. So we have 2 choices here. We only have 8 stitches left. And when you have that few number of stitches, one way that you can finish off the toe is to cut the yarn, leaving a long tail, thread it onto a yarn needle, and just slip all of these live stitches onto the yarn tail like you would if you were finishing off the top of a hat, and then just cinch it closed. I usually go around a 2nd time if I'm going to do something like that. In this case, instead, I'm going to graft the toe shut, but I'm not going to do it the way you would normally do it if you had a wider toe up here. I'm not going to graft the sole to the instep. Instead, I'm going to graft one band to the other. Before we can graft these, we have to rearrange the stitches. So what we need is the 4 stitches from this side and then the 4 stitches from that side. Now I'm using magic loop, so I can just pull my needle like this, and then I can find those 4 stitches right there and push my cable back through, pull it out. If you're on double pointed needles, you just need to rearrange onto 2 needles. And then I can pull this one like this. So now I have the 4 stitches matched up from front to back. One thing that's a little bit different about grafting the band toe is that unlike when you are grafting a wedge toe where you have a lot more stitches, we do need to do the setup stitches for grafting. Frequently the setup stitches are skipped when grafting a sock toe, but we need them in this case. So to do the setup, you're going to bring your yarn needle through that first stitch as if to purl, and into the first stitch of the back needle as if to knit. So you're entering them opposite of how they're presenting to you. This looks like a knit, so you enter as to purl. This looks like a purl, you enter as to knit. And now we can do our grafting sequence where we knit off the knit stitch, purl on from the front needle, and then for the purl stitches, we purl off, knit on, so this is your standard grafting procedure at this point. And just like we had to do the setup stitches for this particular graft, we have to do the final stitches. When we have one stitch left on each needle, we do the final knit off and purl off. And then we're done. So the graft does still have a half stitch offset, which is what you're going to get in a situation like this, but it looks better than if you had skipped the setup and final steps. I like to calculate how long the toe is going to be based on the number of rounds I'm working for the toe and what my row gauge is. And that way I can plan exactly when to start the toe so the sock foot is going to come out correctly. So in the example that I was showing today where I'm using fingering weight yarn in an adult size sock, where the shaping rate is every fourth row one time, every third row twice, and then every other round 3 times, before going into decreasing every round. In every case, you're going to be working 17 rounds and you are going to be eliminating 28 stitches in those first 17 rounds. You can then figure out how many rounds this is going to take in total. In my case, I had 64 stitches to start with. I'm going to lose 28 stitches in those first 17 rounds. And that's going to leave me with 36 stitches. So now I'm going to have to get rid of all 36 of those stitches except for the last 8 that I'm going to graft together. So the number of stitches I actually have left to decrease is 36 minus 8. So I have 28 stitches left that I need to decrease, and because I'm decreasing 4 stitches in every round, that means that there are 7 rounds left that I'm going to work. So the total number of rounds for this particular sock toe when I have 64 stitches is 17 plus the 7. So that's 24 rounds total. And now I can calculate how long that toe is actually going to be by dividing it by my row gauge. My row gauge happens to be 11 rounds per inch. So I would divide 24 by 11, and that's just about 2.2 inches. When my sock is 2.2 inches shorter than I want it to be in total, that's when I would start working this particular toe. What I showed you today was fingering weight yarn with an adult-sized stitch count and using a shaping rate that is 4-3-2-1. You can use other shaping rates. My foot doesn't really work with a toe that is this broad, but I really like this band at the top. So instead, I would be more inclined to use the standard wedge toe shaping, which I have here, and that fits my foot much better, but then continue it on up to the top until I had 8 stitches. So I would work the decreases at the very top every round. I might even stop doing every other round at some point right here in order to get something that was a little bit more rounded. But it will end up being a little more pointy as well because you're narrowing at a quicker rate. So experiment with different shaping rates that fit your foot better, and experiment on your next pair of socks to see what kind of, if you like this at all or if you need to adjust the shaping rate by knitting the first sock with your standard toe and then the second one experiment with the band toe. If you don't like it, you can always rip it out and then re-knit that toe. I have a lot more sock toe videos in this playlist right over here. I also have a written tutorial that explains how to knit custom fit socks, which I will link to down in the video description. And if you're interested in my Casual Friday podcast, that playlist is right over there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.